You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
True Crime Historian presents yesterday's news, tales of the scandals, scoundrels, and scourges of the past, told through historic newspaper accounts in the golden age of yellow journalism. Whether it's a love triangle gone awry, a botched robbery, or the deadly shenanigans of a desperate fugitive, True Crime Historian has got the scoop. New episodes every Thursday at www.truecrimehistorian.com or whatever podcast player you love best.
Hi, I'm Annie from Massachusetts.
And I'm Johanna from Austria, and you just heard the promo for True Crime Historian. I'm absolutely convinced that our listeners will also dig this podcast, and there are over 130 episodes available so far, so there's plenty to binge.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like something our listeners would be into. I've never listened to it, and now I want to. First things first, we want to give a huge shout out and thank you to our newest patrons. Mog, is it Mog versus GB? Mog VGB? Thanks, Mog. And Trisha Chapman. Thank you, Trisha. We really appreciate your amazing support. And if you want more information about our Patreon, we'll have that for you at the end of the episode. We'll tell you all about it. And if you're an original Hellion, then welcome to your favorite international podcast. If it's your first time listening to us, we are very glad you found us. We are two friends from different continents who have never met in real life. We were supposed to this month, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, 2020 had other plans, but, we do this. We chat, we laugh, we cry, and we tell you all about murder, mysteries, and macabre events throughout history. So.
Yes, it's a cup of background information, 2 spoons of fun facts, and a dash of side banter.
And arsenic. Just a liberal zhuzh of arsenic. It's so important for every dish.
So if this sounds like something you might enjoy, make yourself comfortable. And before we start, there's something else I want to address. We did record our last episode on Monday last week, and after we had finished, my family asked me if I had already heard what just had happened, and I had not. Vienna suffered a terrorist attack, the first one in many, many, many years, with so many victims. I think since 1985 was the last time we had a terrorist attack in this magnitude. In 1985, the El Al counter at the Viennese airport was attacked. Terrorist attacks are rare in Austria. We had a huge case of mail bombs in 1995 by a nationalist terrorist. So this is extremely shocking for Viennese people and for all Austrians, in fact. If you listen to us regularly, you might know that I used to live in the city for almost 2 decades, and I only just moved to the countryside recently, like a couple of months ago. But of course, I still have lots of family and friends living there. One of our best friends, he's a police officer in Vienna. Of course, I contacted or tried to contact all of them immediately. All of them are fine. But we definitely want to send our condolences to the families and loved ones of the victims, and we wish everyone who was injured a full recovery. There is a hotline for psychological support. We will link to it in the show notes and in the pinned post in our group. Also, a huge thank you to all first responders, to police, the military, ambulances, and everybody who helped.
Yeah, it's something we're really unfortunately too familiar with over here, whether it be, what we traditionally think of as terrorism or homegrown terrorism, mass shootings, that sort of thing. It seems like they happen so frequently here. It's almost, you almost get numb to them, which is alarming in a whole other a way. But yeah, we're obviously just heartbroken for the people of Austria, and we're thinking of you.
Also, congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden and Madam Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. It was very interesting to watch from over here. It was definitely not boring.
No.
Let's hope for good things in future for all of our countries.
Definitely.
I'd say.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we needn't say more about any of this.
Sounds good. I think we can get right into today's episode. Last week was a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end. Is today a part 2 to last week?
No. So this case is connected to last week's case, but just a little bit connected. So it actually doesn't matter if you already listened to last week's episode. You can either keep listening to this one now and then later go back to episode 86, or you pause now and listen to this episode later on. It's however you prefer is fine.
Sounds good. Are there any warnings for this case?
Let me think of maybe homophobia, and I'm mentioning suicide and attempted suicide. So if that's a trigger for you, you might want to sit this one out.
Okay.
So this week I want to tell you about the case of an Austrian police officer who shot 2 people while on duty. And I know what you all might think now, but hold on. It's not one of those cases. This case is very different. It was the night from 15th to 16th of April 1968, which is... It's starting with the number thing now. It's starting with me because the 15th of April is my mom's birthday. She was born on 15th of April 1963, so she would have been 5 years old at that time.
Nice.
So it's in the 12th Viennese district. The name of the district is Meidling, and there was the well-known department store Tivoli. The store was named after the famous amusement venue Tivoli that was built in 1829 and was located close to Schönbrunn Castle. The Tivoli was a rather luxurious amusement park aimed at the noble high society who was living in the area around the Habsburger summer castle. It offered shoots and slides and a beautiful view from the hill it was located on. Johann Strauss Sr., the composer of the Danube Waltz, gave concerts there. It was fantastic. The Tivoli changed over the years, the shoots had to go and a restaurant and exhibition place was created, but it always stayed a fancy place up until the end of the Habsburg monarchy. During World War II it was closed, but it reopened afterwards, but no more money was invested, the buildings deteriorated and all of its former glory had vanished. In 1967 the Tivoli closed forever. Forever. In 1980 the place fell victim to arson, and in 1991 the Tivoli was completely demolished. But the name lived on in the Tivoli Bridge, the Tivoli Gasse, the apartment block am Tivoli, and up until 1980 in the department store Tivoli.
Yeah, the name is familiar to me, but I'm not sure I would have been able to tell you where it was from.
You're probably thinking of Tivoli in Italy, a city roughly 19 miles outside of Rome, where the Roman high society had their vacation homes.
Yes.
And all the other Tivolis around the world, they are named after that Tivoli. So the Tivoli in Vienna, the Tivoli in Innsbruck, the Jardin de Tivoli in Paris, all the Tivolis I assume you have in the US.
Oh, there must be dozens. And they're all pronounced differently. Good fucking luck to you. No, I think that's exactly right. I think you're correct. And I'm thinking of the Italy. But I didn't know that that's where, or if I did, it was, buried somewhere back in my lizard brain.
It's not that important because we are talking about our Tivoli. Well, not even our Tivoli, our department store named after our Tivoli. The Tivoli store also had an underground car park, and during the night this car park is guarded by a security man. So it's the night of 15th of April 1968, and the security guard decides to take a little nap in his car that is parked inside the car park. Because it's Vienna in the 60s, and he probably didn't expect anything to happen that night, just like all the nights before. But then, around 2 a.m. he is awoken by several gunshots. He gets out of his car to check what's going on and sees a police officer standing in the car park, his gun in his hand and 2 bodies lying on the floor. The police officer yells, "2 burglars, they started shooting at me." And then they call the ambulance and the police station. And even though the ambulance arrives on scene pretty quickly, there is not much they can do. One of the burglars is already dead when they get there, the other one dies soon after in the ambulance. The police officer we are talking about is 23-year-old Ernst Karl, who was born in August 1945 in Lower Austria.
Oh, 23 is so young to go through something like that. My sister and I once went to a Patriots preseason game, which was really fun. And they did this thing where they brought all of the local army that were about to go. This was during the height of the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And so they had everybody there they marched all the soldiers out that were getting ready to go be deployed. And I just started bawling. I was just crying like, they're babies.
They're so young.
They're so young.
I did this Ride a Soldier once.
Yeah.
That you have in the US.
Yeah.
To somebody who doesn't get any mail, maybe. My soldier I got, he was 19. 19.
Baby.
Baby.
Yeah.
But he got home safely. So
Good.
That was good.
Good.
And then Ernst Karl recounts his version of what happened that night in the Tivoli car park. He had been on duty that night making his rounds when he saw two suspicious men entering the car park. He followed them and told them to freeze. The two burglars were both 21 years old and they were Walter Böttler and Johann Kiesel. They had immediately started to fire shots at Officer Karl, so he of course had to return the fire. It was self-defense. And at first it all seemed to make sense. The two men were found with a gun and stockings that they wanted to use as masks. They were lying nearby. And at first the police officers are very impressed with the young man. It looks as if he couldn't have reacted better. Kind of a hero thing to do, right? But pretty soon the investigators start to doubt their colleague's testimony. He had hit both men 7 times, I think altogether, not individually.
Gotcha.
And they both had headshots, which were very clearly fired from a very close range. And all of a sudden, this didn't look too much like self-defense anymore.
Yeah, unless he's some sort of crazy expert marksman, that sounds very problematic.
Yeah, plus they could determine that it was from a close range.
So. Yeah. So that's, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, there's a problem there. So Ernst Karl was taken in for further interrogations, and while the investigators were still busy in the car park looking for evidence, 2 young girls approached a car that was parked outside of the Tivoli department store. It was 19-year-old Marta and 20-year-old Gertrude. And when asked by the investigators what they were doing there, they answered that the car belonged to Marta and that it had been stolen the night before in the nearby Schönbrunner Straße, and they had just discovered it here by accident when they walked by.
Oh, hey, look, there's our stolen car.
Yeah, there's my stolen car that I never reported.
How fortuitous for us to have found it thusly. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds a bit weird, a bit suspicious, you might say.
Just the tiniest bit suspicious.
Yeah, it was also very suspicious to the police, so they thought best to dig a little bit deeper, and they took the 2 girls to the police station as well. And soon they find out that the 2 girls are I don't know if they were just friends or girlfriends of the 2 robbers. The 2 girls start to talk. Walter and Johann had borrowed Marta's car to drive to the Tivoli, where they had planned to rob the cash register with the revenue of the whole day. And they tell the police that the burglars had heard that the cash was supposed to be locked in one of the cars in the car park, which sounds super safe.
Yeah.
But hey, it's the 60s. But then the girls continue their story. They tell the investigators that the 2 criminals were friends with a young police officer who had given them inside information and had even gifted them a gun. And I'm sure it was as if a light bulb went on in the investigator's head. So they confront the 2 young women with Ernst Karl, and they can immediately identify him as the friend.
Oh boy. Okay, so this is complicated.
Marta and Gertrude also state that the police officer had promised to leave a piece of paper outside of the Tivoli where he would write down the best time for the burglary. And indeed, the investigators did find that note, and on it was written 1:05 a.m. And of course now they confront Ernst Karl with all these allegations, and first he denies everything, but little by little he confesses his involvement in the crime.
Because now, there's too much information. He's going to have to, it's too much circumstantial stuff. You gotta confess at some point. They know.
He has to say something. Yeah. He says that indeed he knew Walter and Johann, and indeed he was supposed to be the lookout for them that night. But he had left his position in the Vivenotgasse and had followed them into the underground parking lot. There, he felt threatened by his accomplices, and a shootout had started, which led to the death of Johann and Walter. It also appeared to be the truth that this was not the first time that the 2 had worked with Ernst Karl, but the police didn't find any proof that the burglars had actually even fired a single shot at the police officer at first. They did, however, find the key to the parking lot in his uniform. Now the biggest question was Ernst Karl's version the truth, or was it even more sinister? And what was the motive? But for now, the police could not interrogate Ernst Karl further, as he had suffered a nervous breakdown and was not able to give further testimony. Now we have to take a quick break for a word by our sponsor, Popcorn.
It probably won't surprise you that when you start your first independent podcast, advertisers aren't exactly knocking down your door. And as it turns out, if you want to sound like you're on the same continent, podcasting can get a little bit pricey. That's why we were so glad to have found Podcorn. It's a marketplace connecting podcasters to amazing sponsorship opportunities. With Podcorn, there's no middleman. Podcasts of all sizes can browse and choose the sort of sponsors right for their listeners, set their own rates, and collaborate directly with brands. You never give up any rights to your podcast, and Podcorn is there to support you at every step and ensure you're protected and compensated for the work that you do. The marketplace mission is to give podcasters transparency, creative freedom, and full control of how and when to monetize. Click the link in our show notes to sign up to Podcorn and start browsing sponsorship opportunities for your podcast today.
All right, back to our story. So the police now knew that the young officer was an accomplice of Johanna and Walter, and not for the first time. But what had led to the fallout that night that had led to the death of the two criminals? Only 2 days later, the police knew the whole story. In October of 1967, Ernst Karl was on duty working a vehicle spot check. And that's when he had stopped Johann for some traffic violation and handed him a ticket. A couple of days later, Johann visited one of his regular bars, an underground gay bar, when he ran into the young police officer. So there's a problem, because this is the late 1960s and homosexuality was only legalized in Austria in 1971. And before then, it was punishable by law with a sentencing of 1 to 5 years in prison.
Yeah, I think it's still punishable by prison time in some states. Possibly now, certainly within the last decade. I think it's technically still punishable in a few states. And usually the charge is, quote, crimes against nature, end quote. Some people to this day will run for office, and that will be a part of their platform, to keep sodomy as an imprisonable offense, and that's like in the last decade. I hope I'm wrong, but I think some states do actually still use sodomy laws to prevent same-sex couples from adopting or retaining custody of their children. I'm not casting any shade on your laws in Austria. Are we the hold my beer country? Like, America? Seriously? It's like, but yeah. Seriously now, that would have been a really large problem for a police officer to be seen as gay or at a gay bar at that time. I think, am I going out on a limb to say that that's still a problem now? I think it might be. It shouldn't be.
Well, it's not here.
Yeah.
It's got definitely way more open nowadays, but
good. Yeah. Am I correct to assume that Ernst Karl was gay, or...
Yeah, he was. And I'm not sure if Johann was homosexual or bisexual. I also read that he was in fact heterosexual but had sex with men for money, and that he then blackmailed gay men, and that was the reason for him being in a gay bar.
Oh, yeah. So he doesn't really sound like the sort of person that you'd want to spend time with. Like, I don't think anybody was like, oh no, he's one of ours. He's awful.
By the way, I just want to say that it always confused me that you use the term sodomy in English for anal sex. Because here sodomy is sex with animals. And then I watched Hair, and he sings that sodomy and fellatio and everything is so great. And I was like, oh my God, why would you say that's great?
So their sodomy is sex with animals?
Yeah.
No, here it's anal sex between either. But I think there was a lot of states where it was like, some states it's illegal no matter what your gender. So you could be a married husband, wife, male, female, however, and it's still illegal. But we would say bestiality for sex with animals, I think.
Oh, here it's sodomy.
Yeah. Nope, very different. That would be very alarming, is it, to hear that?
It was when I first heard it. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. That's a step too far.
So, honestly, it doesn't really matter if Johann was gay or bi or heterosexual, no, because what matters is that Johann started to blackmail Ernst Karl after that day. And Johann and his accomplice Walter start to ask for money. They start with little sums like 100 shilling, 200 shilling, but how it goes with blackmailing, the sums get bigger and bigger. And soon the two demand up to 5,000 shilling. And if you just converted it would be 360 euros, but due to inflation, it would be more likely to 1,900 euros today or $2,250. And that's a lot of money for a young police officer.
Yep.
Of course, I tried to figure out how much they earned back then, but I didn't find anything, but it's definitely more than a month's salary for a young officer. I think it's more than a month's salary now for a young officer.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
Anywho, Karl Ernst obviously couldn't keep up with the sums they kept asking for, and they asked for more and more and more. So another solution needed to be found. At first, he asked friends to lend him money. And then at the time, Ernst Karl had also an affair or relationship with a wealthy businessman, so they also started to blackmail this man. And indeed, the guy did write a check for 10,000 shilling. And then probably, I guess, broke things off with Ernst.
Sorry, was Ernst started blackmailing somebody, or the Johann was blackmailing the man?
Well, he blackmailed Ernst to blackmail the man.
I see.
But I think Ernst told him that he's being blackmailed. It's a whole thing.
Yeah. Okay. So Ernst wasn't the one who wanted to blackmail anybody.
No, it was not his idea. But I think they told him that he will get part of the 10,000 shillings, but then he didn't get anything. But they did give him a car for 3 days that he could drive. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like it's worth it, but...
Yeah, that was just one newspaper article that I read, so...
Yeah.
I don't think it was his idea, and I don't think that he felt comfortable with it. I could be wrong.
Sure.
But... So only 2 months after that fateful traffic violation, Ernst Karl was deep in debt. He saw absolutely no way out other than to commit suicide, so he took an overdose of sleeping pills. Fortunately, he could be saved and was taken to a hospital where he had to stay until the beginning of January of 1968. And to me, it's actually quite interesting, because you'd think that a police officer who tries to commit suicide would have to go through several psych evaluations afterwards, and it would nowadays probably take quite a while until he would be considered fit for duty again. But it looks as if that was not much of a concern in the late 60s. Unless they wouldn't know, I guess. I'm not sure if they would have been informed about that, but I think so. I think they would have known.
Yeah, it's honestly, I think even, again, I feel like I'm such a Debbie Downer in this episode, but it's shocking to me that in this day, like today in 2020, that police officers and other first responders, veterans, there's just so many people who really ought to have almost mandatory therapy, or at least mandatory check-ins with a social worker or somebody on a regular basis to see if their job is affecting them in a way where they might need more serious therapy. But it has to be everybody, because unless it's everybody, nobody will do it. You don't want to be the one seen to be going to see the therapist.
Well, that's not the problem here. I don't know with the police, but I'm pretty sure they have a regular check-ins. Like I know from the military, my husband has to have psych evaluations, reports for duty actually. Mm-hmm. He has to go in and have his evaluations. And afterwards, after he returns, it's,
I don't think it's like that here.
Yeah. So after the suicide attempt, the duo, they didn't stop blackmailing the officer, but they did try to involve him in several robberies. So the plan was, for example, to rob a post office in the 12th district. But Ernst Karl couldn't manage to talk them out of it, but he suggested something else. He told them about the money in the underground parking lot of the Tivoli. I'm not even sure if the story was actually true or if he just had made it up. I think he made it up. I don't think there was any money in a parked car there.
Yeah.
But he told them that he would be on the lookout that night in uniform, as he was on duty that night, and he also handed Johann Kiesel the gun. Nothing could go wrong, and they would have more money than ever before. And Johann and Walter were thrilled, because great plan, right? So that night, when they entered the car park, Ernst had followed them, he addressed them, which caused them to turn around, and then he shot several shots at them. Each was also struck by a headshot. Then he took Johann's gun and fired one shot to make the self-defense story plausible. But I guess he was not thinking of how the headshots would make all of this highly implausible. And what he didn't know, there was also an ear witness who testified that the last shot was only fired after a pause. So that would have been the shot Ernst fired with Kiesel's gun.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, that's problematic. That's bad.
I have to say, I honestly do feel bad for Ernst Karl. Everything about this story is horrible, but it does get worse. Ernst Karl was sentenced to 20 years in prison for double murder. I think the blackmailing part acted as mitigating circumstances. But he had to go to infamous prison Stein. And I think it's safe to assume that any prison is harder if you were a police officer before on the outside.
Yeah.
But Stein, that means some of the most hardcore criminals in Austria. So that was probably not great. And Ernst Karl started to show signs of severe mental health problems. He acted more and more violently and had several psychotic episodes. Now, if you have already listened to last week's episode, then you might remember that the murderer of Ilse Moschner, Johann Rogac, was sentenced to life in prison in 1962, and he too was locked up in Stein. At that time, the 8 most dangerous criminals in Austria were all in Stein at the same time. Rogac was considered a troublemaker, violent, and all in all a rather unadjusted inmate. It was the 15th of January 1974, and 30-year-old Ernst Karl was in the common area playing chess with the 41-year-old Johann Rogac, when all of a sudden Ernst started to strangle Rogac, ultimately killing the murderer. Then he pressed the emergency button and waited for the guards to arrive. But what had happened? Ernst Karl stated that Johann Rogac had planned to escape Stein and he wanted to take a hostage, or several hostages, and he asked Ernst to help him. And when Ernst Karl refused, Johann Rogac had jumped at him and tried to kill him. So he had acted in self-defense. Again, the guards and paramedics tried for 1 hour to revive Rogac, but, of course, to no avail. Rumor has it that when the other inmates heard of Rogac's death, they started to cheer and applaud. And thus, the everybody stood up and clapped stories were born. No, but seriously, Johann Rogac was really hated in prison, not only for his absolutely horrible and violent crime, but also for the fact that he regularly ratted out fellow inmates.
Yeah, historically speaking, I mean, snitches get stitches, am I right? It's not.
They do.
Yeah.
For the murder of Johann Rogac, Ernst Karl was sentenced to life in prison. But did he really act in self-defense? Because the other inmates started to talk and they rumored that Ernst had staged a trial for Rogac, where he acted as prosecutor, judge and executioner all in one person. And apparently this would not be the only time Ernst Karl tried something like that. He also wanted to do the same to another inmate, but this time the murder could be prevented by the guards. The victim of this second incident committed suicide only shortly after.
It really sounds like he's dealing with some sort of serious mental illness at this point.
As far as I could find out, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And he suffered more and more often from psychotic episodes. And in those episodes, he believed that he was, again, a young police officer who had to catch the bad guys who were after him. He got medication and was isolated in the maximum security wing most of the time. And next to his door, there was a sign that read, quote, "End of sentence, death," end quote.
That's pretty clear. I mean...
Yeah, but also sad. I mean, in this case.
Yes.
Usually I'm not... It's kind of...
Yeah.
On 14th of January 2001, he suffered from another psychotic episode where he trashed his cell and broke his own nose. He was then strapped onto a bed to protect him from more self-harm, and he was administered a biperidone injection. Wikipedia says about biperidone, quote, "Biperidone is used for the adjunctive treatment of all forms of Parkinson's disease and for reduced sweating in methadone users. It seems to exert better effects in the post-encephalitic and idiopathic than in the arteriosclerotic type. Biperidone is also commonly used to improve acute extrapyramidal side effects related to antipsychotic drug therapy such as akathisia. It relieves muscle rigidity, reduces abnormal sweating related with clozapine and methadone use. Common side effects include blurred vision, dry mouth, sleepiness, constipation, and confusion. It should not be used in people with a bowel obstruction or glaucoma." End quote. According to the guards on duty that day, they checked on Ernst Karl every 30 minutes. The next morning, he was found dead on the bed, and an examination revealed that he had died from a bowel obstruction. That was the last time that the once young and hopeful Viennese police officer had made headlines. A photo of the deceased's pale face with blood running out of his mouth had made its way to the media, and a newspaper had published it in an article criticizing the fact that this inmate had died strapped to a bed, and also one of his nostrils was clogged with a nasal tamponade, because remember, he had a broken nose.
Of course, yeah.
The strapping to a bed, that was outlawed in 1994. it was not permitted to use such a way to fix prison inmates. So an investigation was started to examine the whole incident, and they wanted to see if some wrongdoing had occurred to have the responsible people stand trial, of course. But apparently it was determined that the bed that was used to strap Ernst Karl down was not an outlawed fixture, but a bed with straps for hands and ankles, the ones that are used in psychiatric hospitals to protect patients from self-harm.
I do. Yeah, it's a really difficult and terrible thing to have a loved one who needs restraints, but it saves lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it was ruled that Ernst Karl's death was in no way caused by the use of the straps. I honestly don't want to judge what really happened there. I do hope that everybody acted in their best conscience. But on the other hand, we all know that also so often prisoners are not treated as fellow human beings. It can have a lot of reasons, from understaffed, underfunded prisons to cruel behavior from guards. But there's really no excuse. Every human who is in the custody of the state does have the right to be treated fairly. I don't know. I hope you understand what I mean.
I do, and I agree. Yep, absolutely.
And I think this case is so sad. So sad. I mean, imagine him being born 20 years later.
Yeah.
Being a homosexual would not have been a crime anymore. Or imagine him being a police officer now, where he could be openly gay without a problem.
Yeah.
Or with not that many problems, let's say it like this.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I think, again, it also comes down to that element of undiagnosed mental illness as well.
Yeah.
Right? You just feel terrible. It's just it's so sad.
Imagine what would have happened if he wouldn't have had that traffic control that night.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. If he hadn't gone to the bar that night, if he hadn't... So, it's that what ifs again. Yeah. No, that's sad. But it ties everything together with last week as well. So, yeah, what a sad story. Thank you very much for bumming me out. No, it's...
I didn't want to bum you out. Do you have something good at least?
I do.
Can tell us?
Yeah.
Okay.
I slept really well this week, better than I have for ballpark 4 years. Yeah, I think, the last few months have been tough, no matter which side you're on, or if you're on no side, you're just bombarded and surrounded. And no matter what your political beliefs are, though, I think there are some things to take away from this week to celebrate. There's going to be dogs in the White House again, and one of them is a rescue dog. I think it might be the first rescue dog in the White House.
Yeah. That's what I read. It's the first rescue dog.
Yeah. And also Jill Biden, she is going to be a first lady who is both a teacher and a military mom. I think she was, when Joe Biden was vice president, I think she was the first second lady to work outside the White House. She continued teaching while she was...
Oh.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people who are going to be thrilled that there is somebody who understands what teachers go through and what military families go through. And of course, now we've got our first female vice president, who's also our first Black and first South Asian vice president. Her dad is Jamaican and her mom was from India. I really do think, again, this is not a political statement at all. I think it's really important that representation matters and that these are all really good things. It's also Veterans Day today. And so I want to thank my dad, who is retired Army, and my father-in-law, who is retired Air Force. And to all of our veterans who listen, we thank you for your service.
Thank you. These were all great things,
yeah,
actually.
They're all good things, I think.
And as I said, it doesn't really matter on which side you're on. You can still see positive things.
These are good things, yeah.
Yeah. Dogs are always a good thing.
Dogs are always good. Champ and Major are his dogs. They're German Shepherds. I think they're both German Shepherds. They're beautiful.
What a week, right?
Yeah, it's been a week.
But I have something good. Something very good, actually. So Annie knows 2 weeks ago I found quite a big lump in one of my breasts. And of course, that was super scary. I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer 10 years ago, 11 years ago. Jesus, where does time go, right?
I know.
My dad was a throat cancer survivor. My grandfather died of lung and colon cancer. So, the big bad C word immediately pops up in my head when something is out of the ordinary. So I went to my OBGYN to have it checked, and he said, yes, there is something, and it could be something or nothing, and we need to, have further checks. So 4 days later, I had a mammogram, and I honestly had such a bad feeling.
Yeah.
Even though there were good signs, because the lump does hurt when you touch it, and it is movable, so that's all things you rather want for your lump to be.
Yep.
If you have a lump, you want it to be movable and painful.
Yep. Anytime you find a lump, call your doctor.
Please, yeah.
Call your doctor.
Everything is clear. It's a fibroadenoma.
Yay!
The thing is, and it's crazy, I have it on both sides on the same spot. So the doctor asked me about my bras, and I do have one that has a rather thick seam running exactly there on both sides. So it's very, very likely that caused a fibroadenoma. I tossed the bra immediately.
Good.
Bye. Yeah, everything is great. I just need to come in for a checkup in 6 months.
That's awesome. I'm so relieved for you.
Yeah, I'm too. So please, what I want to say is, please, you lovely people out there, regularly self-check your breasts. I discovered it while taking a shower, but just on one side because the other one was too small. So please, check your breasts every month. Do it.
No matter what gender you are.
Exactly, yeah. That's why I said people.
That's right, yeah. But I think a lot of people don't realize they assume that breast cancer is only women, and men can also get breast cancer. So no matter what gender you identify as, just, constant vigilance, everyone.
All right.
Yeah. So we need to just, in closing, let you know about Patreon, right? So if you want more information on how to support us via Patreon, you can do that by going to patreon.com and searching for Fresh Hell Podcast. Or you can go to our website, freshhellpodcast.com, and you'll find all the information there. You'll also find a link there to our merchandise if you're interested. And we do now have masks. So... yay, 2020. What else?
Our Facebook group. Come join our Facebook group. It's fun. It's great people there. And I just made a post with links to all my favorite Austrian pop songs. That was fun and got me a bit sentimental.
I keep trying to find them and add them to our Fresh Hell playlist on Spotify, but I'm working on it. But it's such a nice group. There are no political posts. Even ones we agree with, if it's political, we laugh, we delete. It's
even through election night.
Yeah.
We were fine. There was nothing.
Yeah. Everybody's been great. It's just a really nice group of people. Yeah. So come say hello.
If you're on it, then say hi to your dogs. We say hi to our dogs. Say hi to all the living creatures.
Yes.
I'm not gonna name all of them now because you know the deal. You know what's there.
You do. Also, we're tired. We've had a week. We're fine. Everything's fine. All right. If you are also having something of a week, please, 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 if you're going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
See you next week.